Like, you're a musician, why join the army?
We expected World War III. Remember a moment where I'm sitting in a hangar, planes flying overhead, chaos all around, sitting there with my rifle and a massive backpack, just looking around thinking, I'm a trumpet player. What am I doing here?
Did you lose anybody during that time there?
We expected World War III because that's how Saddam Hussein had sold the concept. In a field hospital, most of the people coming in there were Iraqi casualties that they were scared when they come in, because this is going to be the worst moment of your life. Nobody leaves, you're not going to make it.
Well, firstly, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
You are about to release a book called Too Many Hats.
Yes.
Why are you writing the book, first of all?
Okay, so this has been 3 years in the making. Everything that I've learned in 24 years in recruitment, I've poured into this book to...
One of the lies we get told is that to be successful, we have to be good at everything. And the real answer to that is, how do I build a team rather than how do I get this done and do it myself? And also, nobody really explains to you as a founder / CEO who you should be hiring and at what point in the journey.
You've got a brilliant map that shows the journey around the contribution compass and ties in with the business journey, and bring the right people with the right energy in at the right time.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make when they embark on a hiring as a senior person in the business, whether that's an operations manager or a second in command?
You must be ready for an A player. You need to be ready to...
The difference between competency-based interviewing and non-competency-based interviewing, that alone blows people's minds. I want to back up for a minute though, because you said there are 5 types of interview, of which that's 1.
Yep.
What are the other 4?
Now you're testing me.
Yep.
You've got a panel-based interview.
Okay.
That would usually happen if you've got... And the way I'd start to determine that, I look at what I call the 3 pillars of successful hiring.
Right.
Even if you have 2 of those 3 pillars aligned and you're missing one, you've got a problem. You've got to get the 3 of those aligned. That's what a good hire looks like. As a CEO, if you're not prepared to put the time and energy into that, don't hire. You're not ready for somebody like that.
Wow, that's a great point. And we have this framework around teams. The T stands for trust and transparency. E is about you've got to empower and understand their energy. A is about those 5 things build high-performing teams. Fact, right? All of those 5 elements, that's the ballgame. I think it'd be a good place to draw this to a beautiful ending. Let's talk about the actual 7 types of second-in-commands.
Sure.
Can you walk us through those?
Yeah, so you've got the executor, first of all. The executor comes in to... So that could be the most important asset in the business.
Wow, lots to unpack there and think about. And I suppose it comes back to being clear on what kind of CEO you are as well. And ultimately, it builds a high-performing culture, which is what we all want, right, as a CEO. And what would you say to somebody who's considering coming to the grown-up business retreats that we run?
I've been to lots and lots of events. I've paid for many events. I've been to Tony Robbins events. I've always got value from events, but the combination of the content, the insights, community, all of that combined make it the most powerful business event I think you can attend.
Love it. Without question. Welcome to the Grown Up Business Podcast. And you're in for a bit of a treat today. We are going to spend some time talking to somebody I've known for a long time and who has gone from being a client to being one of our coaches in our team. Team Purple coaches that we take out to places like Retreat or the Scale Up Summit. Graham has become, in fact, one of our experts on team dynamics and all things to do with teams and profiling. As well as being an expert in the area of recruitment, especially around helping entrepreneurs to recruit their second-in-commands or 2 ICs, as he lovingly refers to them. Graham was Chief of Staff and Operations Director to scale up founders with over 20 years experience in hiring people, background in the military, which we are going to talk about, which means he's got a real commitment and passion for serving and supporting people. Really, he's on a mission to help CEOs get away from having to carry the weight of their business all on their own shoulders. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Graham Brown. Great to have you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for the invite.
Well, great to be here, man. It's lovely to have a chance to finally have a conversation because we've not done this in person for ages. I'm really interested. You are about to release a book called Too Many Hats.
Yes. Too
Many Hats. Why are you writing the book, first of all?
Okay. So this has been probably about 3 years in the making.
Right.
And it's come about because I've heard the phrase, I'm wearing too many hats or I'm doing too many things, almost every call that I have with a CEO.
Right.
And they get into a place where they're stuck. They're doing operational stuff. They get into the weeds of their business and they're not focused on the business. So they're in the business all the time and they're doing too many things. So multifunctional. and they can't cope with it. And I know because I've been there myself, and it's not really a comfortable place. So I thought, how could I help to unpack what's going on in a CEO's life and try and give them the best kind of support? So everything that I've learned in 24 years in recruitment, I've poured into this book to help them get out of some of those boxes.
So that, firstly, congratulations on being in recruitment for 24 years.
I made it.
Yay! A lot of people don't, to be fair, right? It's a pretty brutal, tough industry, right? So how did you get into it? Talk us through, because recruitment came after your military career.
Yes.
And you're a musician by trade?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Trumpet?
Trumpet.
Yeah. So why did you join, like, you're a musician, why join the army?
So I wanted to go to music school, and the Royal Academy of Music and Drama in Scotland, I had to play grade 8 piano, and I couldn't do that. And my careers teacher thought it would be a great idea to join the army. He said, "Why don't you join the forces?" And initially I was going to join the RAF, but they had a 6-month waiting list. I have nothing like the patience to wait for 6 months. So the army was available, and I joined the army, and spent a year at the Military School of Music, one of the best years of my life. Did some great training. They taught me how to orchestrate, and come back from there all bushy-eyed and ready to go. And then the Gulf War came up. That was an interesting
Not in your plan, I'm guessing.
Not in my plan, no. I think what's interesting about forces people is forces people get thrown into all manner of situations. I think whenever there's a crisis in the country, they usually turn to the forces to fix it. You look at what happened during the pandemic, the multifunctional roles, the building 7 hospitals in 9 days, all of which seems impossible. The fire dispute, the ambulance dispute, flood defences. Forces get brought in to fix that, and they're the very best operational people at the world at getting stuff done and making things happen. So being a musician, we got sent out to the Gulf, and my secondary trade during war is a medic. So I did medical training before I went out, and we got posted to a field hospital, and I thought, this might actually be quite fun. Get to do a little bit of medical work. And I found out when we got to the field hospital that we were the lowest qualified medics there. So I ended up on guard duty and pan bashing, which was horrible job, cleaning massive pans from scrambled egg for about an hour and a half. Not the best job. Character building,
yes,
they told me.
Yeah.
So this was the result. But finished I remember when I went to the Gulf. I remember a moment where I'm sitting in a hangar, planes flying overhead, chaos all around, and I'm sitting there with my rifle and a massive backpack, just looking around, thinking, I'm a trumpet player. What am I doing here? And I got a little bit teary, and I thought, right, pull yourself together. There's people around you relying on you, and you need to get a grip. And the way I sold it to myself was, this is going to be the worst moment of your life. Nothing is going to get any worse than this. So if you get through this, then you refer back to this whenever you need it. And that's exactly what I've done. So there's been a couple of moments in my life where I've looked back at that and thought, it wasn't as bad as that. Get a grip, move on. So I'm usually, the military teaches you to become under pressure. So usually when the stuff hits the fan, I'm usually good to go.
And was that experience? Did you lose anybody during that time there? Did it have that kind of impact on you?
No, we didn't lose anybody. But in a field hospital, most of the people coming in there were Iraqi casualties that we looked after, and they were scared when they come in because they'd been told that we were going to torture and kill them, and it's nothing of the sort. So they had interpreters there. They were really well looked after. I mean, it was like a 5-star hotel for them, given the conditions that they had to live in. And there were young boys there at 16, 17. It's just not what you expect to see. But when they got in and they figured out after a few days that this is okay. I don't need to fear for my life anymore. So that was all right. But a chapter of my life I was quite glad to see the back of.
How long were you in for?
Served in the Gulf for 3 months. I think the thing with the Gulf was we were expecting to be out there for 2 or 3 years. You know, we expected World War III because that's how Saddam Hussein had sold the concept. And I didn't think I'd be coming back for a long time because that's how the First World War and the Second World War had gone. And had we been told we'll be out there for 3 months, then to be honest, that would just have been a posting. And I remember sitting in the tent with the rest of the boys. We were discussing, should we go in and finish the job, and would we stay there for another 3-6 months? And everybody said yes. And we didn't do that. We came back, and he did a heck of a lot more destruction before he was finally removed. But when I got back and settled back into civilian life again, Bosnia come up, and I thought, no, that's enough. I think that was a catalyst for me being ready to leave. If I'd been left alone at the Military School of Music, Neller Hall, that was one of the best years of my life. You were just left alone to do music, no army, no pressing all your stuff, no shining your shoes. It was just music, and that was fabulous. And I'm a musician at heart. I love that part of my life. But the military sometimes has a way of crushing that enthusiasm. And when I come back from Neller Hall, it was just right. You're back to your desk again, you're playing trumpet again. And I didn't get to explore the musicality in me. So I thought, and then Bosnia come up and I thought, no, that's probably time to go. So I served for 6 years and bade it farewell.
Well, firstly, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Because it's admirable, right? So what, then into recruitment?
No, I went through the most horrendous sales jobs imaginable for for about a year. I was selling alarm systems door to door.
That's hard.
Yeah,
That's hard.
It's horrible. In the rain, it's just terrible. I sold double glazing, phoning people up in the middle of EastEnders, and they weren't always encouraged, I have to say. So some interesting discussions with, and I heard this sound a lot. Beep. So I got used to that tone. That was burnt into my brain. But after a few horrible sales jobs, I got in with a publishing company who actually taught me how to sell properly and professionally. And then I got headhunted to be the sales manager of the Officer magazine. And ironically, I looked at that and thought, well, I closed the chapter of my life called the Army. Do I want to go back and do that again? But it was quite an interesting opportunity, so I decided to take that up, and I set up there a service leaver magazine called Quest, which did very well, helped a lot of people into resettlement and into work. And I run that for 3 years, and then just wanted to work for myself. And that entrepreneurial fire had been burning for a while, and that was just the right time. So when I did it was an Alta Vista search at the time on.
Careful, that dates you.
I
Careful.
know it does. And I looked up recruitment agencies for ex-military, and to my amazement, there were none. So I set up the first ex-military recruitment agency in 2001. And I jumped into that with absolutely no recruitment experience, but I thought, I'm ex-military and I can sell, I'll figure it out. So wasn't easy, but I figured it out, and over the last 24 years, we've helped over 10,000 servicemen and women into work. So
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, really pleased with that.
That's incredible. So let's talk recruitment, okay? All things recruitment. So I think you went into recruitment with no idea what you're doing, and recruitment gets a bad name, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Very bad press.
Up there with estate agents and politicians at times.
Yep, can't argue with that.
Do you have an alternative profession when you go to dinner parties? Is often a question I've been meaning to ask you.
I would normally say I'm in.
How you do it that way? Okay, fair enough. All right, fair enough. So, like, I think for me, the question is, recruiting's a hard business model anyway. Yes. And over that time, doing it for that length of time, obviously you've specialised particularly in operational people. Yes.
Not to begin with. I think we've placed into just about every trade that the military has to offer.
Right.
So we've done logistics, every form of engineering, mechanical, electrical, electronics, aviation, security, chefs, admin, you name it, we've placed into it. Some very highly niche roles. I think our bread and butter on the military side has been logistics and engineering, because that represents about 70% of military trades.
Right.
So we've been very effective in those areas. But I think what's shifted, probably due to operations in the Middle East over the last 15 years or so, in Afghanistan and Iraq, we found that the military mindset has started coming into conversations. And I think that didn't happen before, because we had a situation where the army in particular didn't have the best name among civilians. And I think when people started to fall, and the press pretty much every day were reporting a death or a serious injury, public opinion started to shift away from that model and towards a more supportive model of the forces. And the military mindset was something we got asked for quite a lot. And that's in terms of resilience, can-do attitude, getting things done, loyalty. People understand that about the forces. So that was a little bit of a shift in our approach to the type of people we placed. We started moving into more managerial roles, less trade heavy. And off the back of that, I remember coming to one of your retreats. I think it was maybe the first retreat as a coach 3 years ago. And you said, operations, military, that's a great idea. You should do that. And I didn't pay any attention to that. And then at the next retreat, about 7 or 8 delegates said, operations, military, that's a good idea. You should do that.
Well, it can take a couple of retreats before you get the point.
Yeah. Well, the universe is sending me stuff, and I wasn't ready to pay attention. But what naturally happened is we started placing more operations managers, middle managers into roles, and operations and military just makes sense. You know, operations logistics is a military term. And in terms of getting stuff done, the ability to make things happen under pressure in a calm and measured way, I think our military are the very best in the planet at doing that. So moving into looking at a second in command has been quite a natural progression for us. What I've found out though is that a number of employers don't understand what they're looking for ops wise. So they find it difficult to define tactical versus strategy. So you talk to them about a COO and sometimes they'll say, I'm not ready for that. Sometimes they're right. And sometimes what they need is an EA or an operations manager to either organise their diary or do the tactical ground stuff. And that's absolutely fine. So I've got a little matrix which I'm happy to share with viewers on what that looks like and how to break that down into the different operations roles.
Cool. Well, if we can have it as a PDF, we'll put a link to it in the show notes below for people. So just talk to us about that. I think there's an important point there that I don't want to gloss over, which is how do you know, how do you identify when you're scaling a business? So let's put it in that context, right? You're scaling a business. How do you know who to identify as your next hire? What should you be looking for before you talk to somebody like you, before you engage with, either a headhunter or a recruiter? Like, how do you know what to look for? How do you identify and break that down?
I think most of the conversations I have with CEOs along those lines, they're starting to drown. They're either missing something in their team, or it's rarely that they want to do everything themselves.
Right.
They need help. They don't always know where they need help, but sometimes they feel like they have to do it all themselves. And I've been in that position where I thought, as the business owner, I need to be accountable, and that's just not true. If you need the help, bring the help in. Sometimes that's not always internal. Sometimes you need a coach to give you some help. Sometimes you need somebody on your wing. Sometimes you need somebody executing your orders and your vision. So getting some clarity around what that looks like, that's part of what the focus in the book is looking at how to come to that decision and exactly what you need. So you need to do that work first before you even begin to hire.
Yeah.
Understand what you're looking for and start to map out your responsibilities, what you're good at, where your strengths are, and what you don't want to do. And as a business owner or a founder, I think you've earned that right.
Yeah.
And that do the things that keep you in flow, that you're engaged with, and that make you fly.
Yes.
Make the best use of your time, and everything else farm out to somebody else, and somebody else who's good at it.
Yeah. I think that's a distinction, isn't it? I think for me, a lot of entrepreneurs think one of the lies we get told is that to be successful, we have to be good at everything, which is just not true. And therefore, I think we can spend an awful lot of time, and way too much time, trying to develop skills in areas that we really shouldn't be trying to develop skills in, because the best we're ever going to be is average at it.
Yep.
And actually, the real answer to that is, how do I build a team, rather than how do I do this? How do I get this done and do it myself, right? And that, I think, is a journey that every entrepreneur has to go on. And certainly when you start out, and I've had this experience and I've coached people through this as well, is when you're underfunded and relatively small, you have an abundance of time and not enough money. And therefore what you tend to do is you tend to go, I'll do it myself because I've not got the cash to hire somebody right now. And then that very quickly becomes a pattern that you just run again and again and again, which is, oh, I've got this issue that needs dealing with, I'll just do it myself. And if you're not careful, that becomes a habitual behavior pattern, and that traps you. And I think, and also nobody really explains it to you as a sort of founder / CEO. Nobody really explains who you should be hiring and at what point in the journey. And it's been a sort of really interesting learning point for me to go, actually, nobody explains, when is a good time to hire a salesperson, for example, or what size should you be before you hire a salesperson? What point should you bring an FD in? What point should you bring a second in command or a COO in? It's very rare to have people map that out for you as a founder. It's almost like assumed you'll just know. And I'm like, look, after 20 years of doing this, I can tell you with absolute certainty that there are specific things that you should hire at specific points in the journey, without question. And if you hire the wrong person at the wrong time, even the right person at the wrong time, it can be a disaster.
Yeah,
it can be a disaster.
You've got a brilliant map that shows the journey around the contribution compass and ties in with the business journey and how a business scales, which makes a lot of sense. You get that journey right and bring the right people with the right energy in at the right time. You've got a real chance of scaling effectively.
Yeah,
with less bumps.
Yes, true. Yeah, and but I do think that starts with a level of self-awareness first, right?
Yeah,
you have to understand yourself, and that this is why I'm always very careful where people say, "Oh, this is how you build a team. Build a team like Richard Branson. Build a team the way Elon Musk did. Whoever, it doesn't matter, right?" The reality is we're going to need to build a team based on our profile first, or our natural talents first, rather than the way you built it, or I built it, or John built it, or Sarah built it. So I think quite often the danger is you try and follow someone else's model, and if they've got a different profile to you, then it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest sort of mistakes you see people make when they embark on a hiring of a senior? Let's put it as a senior person in the business, whether that's an operations manager or a second in command or a COO. What are some of the mistakes you've seen people make when they embark on that?
Not being ready for somebody good. So I hear the phrase A player being bandied around quite a lot.
What does that mean, and why has it become so popular?
Well, it's A player means different things to different people, and that's absolutely right. So I've got two customers at the moment that I'm working with who have both asked for A players, and there's a very good book on A player strategy from the States by Eric Herrencole, which is very useful. And in that book, he explains that an A player is different for everybody. So you need to look at your own criteria on what an A player looks like for you. Do you need somebody with a particular skill set, a particular mindset, a particular level of seniority, a particular energy, a culture and values fit, or a combination of those? So you need to map that out for yourself, I think, before you dive in. And one really important thing about an A player, when you speak to somebody at that level, you know it. And many times CEOs, founders, they're not ready for an A player. And they make the mistake of trying to bring somebody in and assume that they have all the power in the interview process. Not the case. There should always be a balance with something like that. And it's very easy, because you're paying the salary, to think, well, they'll fall in line, and that's a mistake straight away. A players are attracted to other A players.
True. They don't want to be managed by B players, by the way.
No, not at all. They'll spot that a mile off and they'll be gone. So when you find somebody really good, I would say you must be ready for an A player. You need to be ready to pay the salary and look after them, and make sure that there's a really clear road ahead for them on how they're going to develop and how the business is going to develop. And not only will you not keep them, you probably won't hire them in the first place, because they'll see right through that. And they'll be asking you the difficult questions. So before an A player interview, you got to do your homework, and I would recommend doing probably as much research as the candidate's going to do about you, because they will come in prepared. They'll know exactly what they're going into. They'll have done their homework on the background. One COO role I'm working with at the moment, I've got two candidates forward, and I've spent 10 times as long with those candidates as I have with an operations manager role. Why is that? Because they ask me more. They spend more time with you. They're more inquisitive. They want to know everything. So when I'm going back to the founder on this, he's saying, I'm not used to getting asked all these questions. That's because they're both A players. That's what I'd expect. I prepared you for this. And he said, right, now I understand what we're up against. And I think in the start he was saying, well, why are we paying fees for this? Now he understands that. Now he can see where the time has gone in. And that time and due diligence is really important, because if you put 5 people, 5 qualified, very capable COOs in front of any CEO, 4 of them are wrong. 4 of them are not a good fit straight away. 1 in 5 has got a chance of being a good fit.
Really?
And the way I'd start to determine that, I look at what I call the 3 pillars of successful hiring.
Right.
So we look at the skills and ability of the candidate. Do they have the skills and ability to do the role? Will they be tested and challenged sufficiently without pulling them out of shape? Second thing is, do they have the natural energy aligned to the role, and how does that balance with a CEO? And thirdly, the culture and values fit. So most employers hire on skill and fire on behaviour.
Yeah.
They tend to they'll look at the skills and ability and ignore everything else. Huge mistake.
Yeah.
So even if you have 2 of those 3 pillars aligned and you're missing one, you've got a problem. So the example of that is skills and ability ticks everything in a CEO's box. The natural energy is absolutely aligned, and they think, this is the hire, this is the A player that I've been looking for. And they get them in, and they within a few months they find out that the values are misaligned. They're just not on the same page. They've come from a different culture. The business is set up as quite a cool, hippie Google type culture, and the COOs come from a corporate background. There's a misalignment on the culture. So even though 2 of those 3 pillars are perfect and a perfect fit, the third one isn't right, and that's when you've got a problem. You've got to get the 3 of those aligned. That's what a good hire looks like, and that takes time and energy.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared to put, as a CEO, if you're not prepared to put the time and energy into that, don't hire. You're not ready for somebody like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a bit like a stool, isn't it? 3 legs on a stool.
Yep.
It's exactly that. If you have 2, great, but the third one's going to be the one that you've got a challenge with. I think that's such a valuable kind of way to think about it. And for me, it's I think sometimes people, I don't know if you've seen it, where clients will know that bit's wrong, but they'll kind of go, yeah, but I need somebody. So they kind of go with it anyway, and that usually doesn't work out.
Almost always doesn't work out.
Yeah.
If that's the case, wait. It's not right. There's no reason to rush into a hire like that for any reason. Sometimes hires like that take months, sometimes up to a year. If you look at a typical chief operating officer, will probably be on a 3 to 6 month notice period. I would expect that. If they're available, you're lucky. But most of the time they'll be held to that, because it's a key appointment in the business. And I would then be looking to just gauge why they're moving on. And one case I've got at the moment of somebody who's looking to move on. He's taken we put him in as an ops manager, promoted to ops director, and moved on to lead the business. And he's taken the business from 6 to 16 million.
It's good growth.
Yep, great growth. The business isn't quite moving in the right direction, and he's thinking, right, I'm ready for the next challenge. So those are those kind of conversations. He started as an operator, but his energy is able to flip to being a CEO. That's not for everybody.
No.
Some people are best served in an operational box,
Yes.
and others are able to transition. So I would say that depends on the partnership between the CEO and the COO, or whoever the senior operator is in the business. Having that yin and yang is really important to find the right kind of balance.
And, those kind of candidates, obviously, when they make the switch, how important is the onboarding then, the process for them?
Critical. So if you're going to lose a hire, you'll often lose them in those first 3 months because they don't get settled properly. Another thing I'm happy to share, I've written 3 ebooks around the whole recruitment process. Everything from getting the right language in a job description so that...
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's unpack that, right? Because I think it's easy to just... I think it matters. Let's talk about mistakes.
Okay.
Because let's get into the mistakes, right? Because I think one of the mistakes is people don't think about talent acquisition as a function. True?
Yep.
Right. So we always think about customer acquisition. That's, entrepreneurs, customers, grow the business, right? But I often say at different stages, you're going to need to acquire different things. First of all, you've got to acquire customers, definitely. Then you're going to need to acquire talent. And it always blows my mind how many people don't actually invest in the idea of thinking about the marketing of a job role or position and somehow expect to attract great talent. Like if you were advertising if you're trying to market to attract a great customer, you would put time, effort, energy into it. You'd write ads that would attract the right customer, so you know who your target market is. You would have landing pages. You would have videos for them to watch. You would have all those things, right? Because you want a customer to trust you. Now you want to attract talent into your business, and you're sending them where? To an Indeed ad or whatever, right? It's like, hang on a second. Like, think about the amount of effort you're putting into the process. And I think the key thing starts with getting the languaging right. And most people's languaging is written for a job that they would apply for, correct?
Yep. So what you were outlining at the start there is if only recruitment worked like that, the time and energy goes into that. You often find that the time and effort hasn't gone in. Sometimes I don't even get a job description. And
which is mind-blowing, isn't it?
I know.
That just blows my mind that people would spend £60,000, £70,000, £80,000 on a salary and not have a job description of what they're trying to recruit for.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind. Literally, I'm like, how are you running a bit? I don't understand how you're running a business.
And the excuses are usually I'm too busy to put a job description together, but they are prepared to pay the money, or sometimes they'll try and undercut. But it simply doesn't work. Set the time aside to make sure that you've got that right, and we'll work with customers to hone that down and spend a bit of time with them. Because if you stick an ad up in Indeed, and some clients have done that and they've said, oh, we're going to try Indeed first. They've got 100 CVs and they spend a day or two clawing through 100 CVs to find out that none of them are right. Or they'll interview 3 or 4 of them and still find that none of them are right. Or they'll interview 3 or 4 of them and employ somebody and then have to sack them. So the processes we put in place are to counter all of that and stop that happening. Make it difficult to get in your business. Again, you've earned that right.
Yeah.
But you need to show the process a little bit of respect and put some time into it. And you want people to look at a role that speaks to them and it's the right kind of language for them, and they'll look at it and think that's for me, or no, maybe that's not the right kind of role. So it just saves time in the whole process. Get that part right. That's 101.
Yeah, and I think there's an important distinction here between what I think you do, which is more executive search and selection, I would say, and recruitment. because I think recruitment gets a bad name because it lumps everything in all together, including people who recruit for, part-time temps, whatever, right? No, nothing against people who do that for a living, by the way, but that's commodity. That's a commodity, right? Yeah. Whereas what you do is a highly skilled, highly refined executive search function. Yeah. That's what you do. And that's different. That's close to headhunting.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that, I think if you move away from the language of, I'm a recruitment company, not I'm an executive selection company. We do executive search and selection for COOs. I think that, as a brand positioning piece for you, is like night and day between that and recruitment. And I think sometimes we have to think about, actually, the rest of the industry is saying that's what we are. Maybe we need to move over here. It's the same thing of, I've stopped saying I'm a business coach, particularly. It's not a main thing I lead with now. I'm a scale-up strategist. I'm going to show you how to scale to 7 or 8 figures and exit in 3 years or less. I know that's what I do. Now, as part of that, there'll be business coaching in there, but there'll also be events. There'll also be profiling. There'll also be team days. There'll be all the other things that go in there. But I just wonder if there's an opportunity for you in them repositioning just exactly how you do what you do because of the value that you add with exactly what you've just explained.
Yeah.
And I think if you say recruitment, everyone just assumes it's box shifting, it's sending me rubbish CVs, it's not doing any work. Whereas actually your process, there's a lot of skill that goes into that.
Yep.
And a lot of time, right?
And a customer this week said to me, you've been working on the role for 10 days, you haven't sent me any CVs. I said, we've had 100 applications and I haven't sent you any CVs because none of them are good enough. So when I send you somebody, they're worth looking at. And I would rather lead with that because that's how we behave. And I would really like, if we're going to get any referrals, I want that to come from somebody who's worked with us, trusts us, and sees the time and effort we put in, because it's not common, and it should be.
Yeah. So let's go back. So step one is you've got to get the job description sorted and be really clear on, and I always think, be clear on the friction that you're also wanting this person to come in and solve, because you're paying to bring someone in to remove a friction point in the business as you're scaling, right? Whether that friction point is operations or whether it's logistics or whether it's technical, there's a friction point in the business and you're wanting somebody to come in and remove it, right? And it's always a good question to ask is what is the friction point we're wanting this person to remove when they turn up?
Yep.
Because that's a question to go in an interview as well. So have you had experience of removing this friction point in your other role? Because, by the way, when you start, that's what you're going to be faced with, rather than, hey, you're going to be here and everything's rosy. It's, no, we're hiring you because we've got a problem and we need you to fix the problem. That's fundamentally why most people hire people, right? So point number one is that. Point number two is then saying, okay, great. Why do most people make an absolute hash of interviewing?
It's another podcast. I think they try and rush the process. They try and get a bum on a seat. They do a one and done interview where it's right. I like the cut of their jib. There's a lot more to interviewing than that. Take your time, take a bit of care. It's not about a bum on a seat. Wait if it's not right, and just be patient. One of the lessons I had a few years ago, I think when I started working with you, I remember doing my first team session with my own team, and I was doing the books at the time, and energy wise, not good for me. I'm not a refiner.
Refining being detail orientated, attention to detail, specific, very analytical, all of that, right?
Yes.
Just for those who don't know what we're talking about.
Yes. Not my bag.
Not really, no.
I'm not very good at that. But I felt as the business owner, I had to be accountable for the numbers, and I had to be doing the books. Now, there's a difference there. Checking in to make sure everything's okay is very different from actually doing the operational work around the numbers.
Yeah, definitely.
Which crushed my energy. And I had to do it every Friday, and it got further and further into the Friday to the point where it was nearly into Saturday. So, one of my colleagues said, well, I could pick that up for you. And I thought, no, as the business owner, I need to do that. She said, why? And I didn't really have an answer. She said, let me do it and see how we got on. Her refining energy was 44%. Not only was she much, much better at it, she did it in a fraction of the time, and she never made a mistake. And when I asked for a report, she gave me exactly what I asked for. So I didn't make that mistake again. And that took such a weight off me, So the accountability for me then was looking at her numbers, and I got better at being able to see where those numbers balanced.
Yeah.
So that was
The accountability is to have the numbers done, not to have to do them.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
That's the shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the subtle shift.
Yeah.
And your refining energy is about 9 or something ridiculous.
11.
Is it 11? Sorry, I apologise for exaggerating how much less you have, right?
I wasn't proud of 11, so you can
Well,
have that one.
we do know people who've got numbers as low as 3 or 4. So,
We do.
So, it's all context, right? So, okay. I tell you something that really I find it, and I've said this at a lot of seminars when I speak to entrepreneurial groups and stuff, and I'll say, how important to your scale-up journey do many of you feel that hiring the right talent is by show of hands, right? And everybody will put their hand up and say, it's an important thing to do. I say, okay, great. Keep your hand up if you have read a book on interviewing skills in the last 12 months. And 99% of the hands go down. And maybe 2 hands in a room of 100, possibly, so 98, I will keep a hand up, right? And you go, this is crazy, right? It's like your ability to search and select and attract talent is going to define your level of skill. In fact, Harvard Business School says the ability to attract talent, retain talent, and develop talent is one of the key differentiators between companies that go on and scale to $50, $100 million and those that don't. Like, that's one of the key things, right? Their ability to attract, retain, and develop talent. So if it's that important, it blows me away that so many people don't spend time learning the skill, let alone like just learning the skill, first of all, like how to do a difference between competency-based interviewing and non-competency-based interviewing. That alone blows people's minds. Well, what are you talking about? It's like, well, okay, let's just explain for people who may never have come across those terms. Competency-based interviewing is what?
It's working out the competencies of the role and working through that. That can be done. That can be done one-to-one, or it can be done with a group. But ensuring that the competency that you need in the role is followed and happens. And there's 4 or 5 different types of interviews. That's the most common.
Right.
So just sitting down with somebody, having a conversation, making sure they've got the skills and ability to be able to deliver on what they say they will.
So basically making sure they have examples from previous jobs of doing that skill.
Yes, and digging into that.
Right.
And what's interesting about that, I've the other ebook that I'll share is the Interview Excellence. Right. Which is digging into the right type of energies. So, for example, you interview somebody who doesn't you know how much refining energy, eye for detail you need in a role, and you profile somebody and they've got a little bit less than that. How do you test that? You test that by asking those type of questions that I've outlined in my guide. So
give us an example.
Okay, so I see a role, so I've got 11% refining energy. I'm not a detail guy, but I see a vacancy advertised and think, ooh, that's a good salary. I'm going to apply for that. And I get an interview because I've managed to tailor my CV effectively enough, and I've got an interview. I'm sitting in front of the client, and they ask me a detailed question. They say, give me an example of ... So I give them an example. Now they've got my interview guide sitting next to them, so they know that I need to have 25% refining energy, much, much higher. But I know that as well because I'm quite clever. Right. So I'm going to play the game. And they start to develop a linear questioning sequence. So they're listening to my answer, they develop another question out of that, and they dig deeper, and they peel a layer back at a time. What happens when you're not wired for detail is you'll really struggle to answer those questions. So you keep digging and you keep on asking questions about the detail of the example. And if you're like me, you'll start to give woolly answers and you'll struggle to answer, and frustration will start to show through. And that goes for any energy. If you're not wired in that way, you just won't think like that. So there's no disrespect to people who are any profile. That's just the way it is, but it can be tested, and it must be tested as well. And because I don't think you're doing any service to any party in the recruitment process by allowing that to go forward.
No, completely right.
Yeah.
Well, and also the other clue is usually as people struggle to come from experiences, they tend to have their eyes tend to go up and to the right. So from a neurolinguistic point of view, that's where they're accessing the part of the brain that's creative.
Yeah.
So they're trying to come up with answers because they don't have experiences, where if they've been there, done it, and had the experience, and they can evidence it, their eyes tend to go down to the left because that's where they're evidencing it from. So, yeah, it's just interesting to kind of look at this stuff if you're interviewing people to go, I should have a clue, I should have an understanding about how that works from a body language point of view as well, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
I want to back up for a minute, though, because you said there are 5 types of interview, of which that's 1.
Yep.
What are the other 4?
Now you're testing me.
Yep.
You've got a panel-based interview.
Okay.
So that would usually happen if you've got 4 or 5 stakeholders involved.
Right.
And you'll be in front of a panel. The others can't remember off the top of my head.
We'll come back.
Yeah.
We'll come back to them, right?
Circle back to that.
We'll circle back to it because I do think it sounds interesting. Yeah. What do you think of assessment centres, using an assessment centre?
That's one of them.
There you go.
Assessment centres can be very effective if you've got volume. So I've run assessment centres before. If you're looking for 20 or 30 people with the same skill, then they're really effective at getting through. And usually how they'd be run is you'll get everybody in a group, you'll give them a briefing, and you'll move them around different functions to either be interviewed by different people or to assess different things. So that could be a competency test, it could be a written test, and a numeracy test, interviewed by different people, a team building assessment,
right.
Quite possibly. So you'll have them all together for a day. And at the end of that day, you'll score them, and you'll be able to shortlist from that. So they can be really effective for volume.
Yeah, I think they're also brilliantly effective for salespeople.
Yeah,
actually, I think to do that, because obviously there's an element of competition involved with it. I also tend to think if you work in some element of presentation skills to that, that's kind of quite an important piece in the process as well.
Yeah,
that can work really well. But I do think whether it's an assessment center or a group kind of interviewing process where you get to meet 2 or 3 people in the business is also really helpful. Because
I had an interesting example of we do recruit salespeople from time to time, and I had an interesting example a couple of weeks ago. A client filled in the contribution identifier, which is a fabulous free tool that outlines the energy of the job itself. So that's very effective for being able to match candidates to that. So we use that to great effect. And he completed that, and they were looking for somebody with high activating energy. So loads of drive, very creative problem solver. And interestingly, that was the same profile as the client. And I asked him to profile his top salesperson. And his top salesperson was a sustainer down at the opposite end of the compass. And he said, I don't understand that. I said, how long is your sales cycle? And they were looking at getting investment from high net worths in the UK. And he said, 6 to 9 months. I said, okay. I said, if you put high activators in with a 6 to 9 month sales cycle, they'll get very frustrated. Yeah. And they'll struggle to see those deals through. That's why that guy's your top salesperson, because he's patient. He's a gatherer. And he'll wait and assess and make sure the customer's looked after and nurture the process. That's why he's that good. And I think that's what you need to be looking for. So you can have salespeople in any part of the company.
Totally right. Yeah. Well, if you're selling technical sales,
yep.
If you're, I've had a client, they're selling technical stuff. So you're selling very complex technical things to technical people. If you don't have a salesperson with enough refining energy for the details, then they're going to struggle because they won't be able to build trust with somebody who is going to have lots of technical questions. Or if it's, tech and stuff like that, if it's tech or engineering salespeople, they're going to need an element of that as well, which is just really important. Yep. But I think certainly in the sales space, I think it goes back to asking that question, which is what's the length of the sales cycle? Because actually it's the first question I always like to start before you recruit anybody is if it's fast FMCG, sort of like fast consumer goods, or really short sales cycles, like maybe 2 calls and then it's a decision, then activating energy type profiles are great. And actually sustaining energy profiles struggle to move things that fast, so they tend to lose customers because they're not quick enough to get to the close and the conversion piece.
Yep.
So again, with all of this, I think what is the issue that we're trying to solve? But also, I think that understanding people is the reason why most people don't scale. I think the people piece becomes the constraint to growth for most organizations. They haven't got the right people in the right seats.
Yep.
I think that in my experience.
Back to Jim Collins. Absolutely
yeah,
right.
Good to great. Jim Collins cracked it, nailed it. Right people on the bus, but in the right seats.
Yep. And too often we don't get that right. Employers don't get that right. And there was I won't mention any names, but one of the coaching sessions I did for you, one of the business owners pitched up and said, I've got a lady on the course. She's handed a resignation in. Is it worth putting her on? We've paid for the place. I said, well, you might as well put her on. She's paid for the place. She said, okay. So she came on. We went through the compass stuff, and she was a high inspirer, and she was in a job as an analyst. And
yeah, that won't work.
And I said, why are you leaving your role? She said, oh, I'm stuck in a little office by myself. And then the business owner pitched up and said, we've got a sales role open at the moment. Graham, do you think she might be suitable for that? That's interesting. Why don't we give that a whirl? So we had a laugh about it, and we finished the training. And at one of your scale-up events 6 months later, a lady came up and gave me a massive bear hug, and she said, thank you for saving my job. And that was unexpected, and she said, I remembered her face, but not her name. And she said that day kind of changed everything for me, because I'm loving my job now. And just that little adjustment, she said, the next day I rescinded my resignation, and I'm loving what I'm doing now. So that was lovely.
Right people, right seats. Yeah. Powerful concept, but I think if you don't have the right tool, which is the difference there, I think most people find it very hard to do that because they're going off what they can see, not what they can measure or understand. And certainly one of the big frustrations for me over the years was couldn't get a tool that would allow me to understand data on people, right? Which is, why we bought the contribution compass to the UK, yeah. and why it's had such a profound effect on people. My point of view is, before you release somebody, you always want to look if you can reposition them first. Because 9 times out of 10, if they're going, there's something they've either ended up in a role that's not right for them, or they're out of flow, or they're just not. Then there's a part of their profile that isn't being met, and it's a lot easier to kind of go back and go, look, if you've invested time and energy in this person, and they're a good cultural fit, back to your point on values, then actually let's see if we can reposition them before they go, right? Or we either lose them or we release them, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's easy to just go, oh, they're going, rather than going, how's it going to be? We need to take responsibility, first of all. Have we put that person in the right role, actually? Or have we just ended up with them in that role because we needed to sort it short term, and then they've ended up stuck in it?
There's something that blows my mind when I'm doing the team coaching. And when we go through the post-team exercise, we're looking at the team and what keeps people in flow, what knocks them out of flow. And a state of flow is when you're engaged with what you're doing, you're loving what you're doing, the time disappears in a day and it's fun. You're enjoying your job, and you come in with a spring in your step every morning. Isn't that where we want to be when we go into work? And being out of flow is the exact opposite of that. When you look at the clock and you think, oh, I've got another 4 hours of this to go. But when you understand what those activities are, the 3 things that keep you in flow, the 3 things that knock you out of flow, and how much time you're spending on each of those in a week. When I circle back to that and I ask people, what percentage of flow are you in at the moment? In a team of 10 people, you'll get 1 or 2 people saying 80%, knocking it out the park, loving my job at the moment. But on average, I get 50%. People are 50% in flow. Now, what that says to me is they're 50% out of flow. Why is that important? Well, if you had a piece of equipment in your office and it was working at 50% efficiency, what would you do with it? You'd either get it fixed or you get rid of it. But we accept that of our people. Why? How much money are employers leaving on the table by accepting that people are out of flow? That's nuts to me. And that's entirely fixable. Just a simple little exercise, get them tuned in and try and move the Moneyball incremental improvements. Move that from 50 to 60 and see the difference.
Oh, it's huge.
It doesn't need to be 100% flow because you can't accept that people are going to be in peak flow all the time. That's not life.
Well, I spoke at someone else's mastermind in the UK a couple of months back, and I was doing this as an example, and we had a lady in the legal profession, and I was just running some numbers, and I'll change the numbers slightly, but to make the point. But I said, "How big's your salary bill?" And she said, "Let's just use $100,000, $100,000 a month, £100,000 a month, right? It doesn't matter, but it's £100,000 a month, right? That's a £1.2 million salary bill." And then I said, "Okay, how in flow are you?" And she was like, probably 30%. And I said, "Okay, that's really interesting as CEO. Secondly, let's I'll tell you a funny story about this at the end of it. But I also said, let's assume based on your number that it's 50%. Everyone says they're about 50%, which is pretty much what the average tends to come back with, even though I think most people over exaggerate it, right? I think it's less than that, but most people don't want to admit that to themselves, let alone to anyone else, right? But let's assume it's 50%. That means it's a £50,000 a month opportunity of productivity that your business is losing. 50,000, that's £600,000 a year of hard money, cash that your business is losing because you're not fixing this. And I looked at her and I said, "Answer me this question. If I set you a target of £600,000 revenue, what would you do?" She goes, "I'd go to work, I'd start doing marketing, we'd do this, we'd set up events, we'd do that." She had this whole like here's how I'd go and make 600 grand, right? I said, if I gave you an hour, you could come up with a plan for that, right? Yeah. She said, I could do that with my team and we'd figure out how to make another 600 grand if you had to. I said, so why wouldn't you put the same level of intensity into figuring out how to work with your people to save 600 grand? I was like, and she looked at me sort of like as though I just invented fire, and and I said, and we do this all the time as entrepreneurs because we go get the exciting money rather than the money that's sitting in the business that's easy to get. We go get the thing that's exciting, chase the animal, right? Like all of that, hunt and get the business in. Yeah, but hang on a minute. To make 600 grand, if your business is 30% margin, which let's be honest is really high, is a high margin. You got to do 1.8 million in sales to make 600 grand. Okay, so let's assume it's half of that, 50%, or 600 grand. So even if it's 300 grand and all we save you is 300 grand, I said, if you could get that done by training your team, profiling your team and training your team for 6 months with one of our trainers, and I said, that would probably cost you less than around about 30 grand for 6 months to do that, right? That's a 10 to 1 return on investment if it's 300 grand we save you. It's 20 to 1 return on investment. It's a 600 grand or whatever. It's huge. It's massive.
It's not even a conversation.
And she was just looking at me like, why am I not putting money into this? And, I just had a conversation today with a client of mine and we have a proposal for what some of our team to go in and do the team dynamics work for them and train their senior managers. And one of their directors, High Refining Energy, is arguing because it's going to be about £36,000 to train their team up and, give them leadership skills, teach them how to recruit properly, because that's a problem, teach them how to manage their people based on their profiles, all of that stuff, right? And he's saying, this is a lot of money. And the CEO is saying to me, it really isn't, because if these people increase their performance and productivity by 10%, we'll make an extra £1 million this year. That's 36 grand on training to make an extra £1 million. It's like the ROI is enormous. But I think so often people get this belief that, the people stuff is just hard. It's complicated. It's difficult. Yeah, it is, but it doesn't mean it can't be mastered, yep. Right? So is playing the trumpet. So is playing the violin. So is being like playing a musical instrument if you've never done it before. Yeah, it's hard. Of course it is, but you can learn it. And that's what I think is really amazing to me is that like the leadership, the whole thing about leading a team, right? And we have this framework around teams. T stands for trust and transparency. E is about you've got to empower and understand their energy. So it's about giving the right energy and empowering people, empower and energize. A is all about accountability, right, and alignment. So you've got to be aligned around the same goals and then hold people accountable. So about alignment and accountability. The M is about measurement and metrics, right? And I've had conversations with someone the other day said, do you think I should measure my sales team? I was like, yes, I think we should do that. That's a good conversation. We should definitely we should do that. You're not doing that? No, we don't measure. Don't want to embarrass everybody by the poor performers, like not having, don't want to embarrass them. I'm like, okay, if they're not performing, that's a problem. And embarrassment should be the least thing we're worried about, right? And then the S is they've got to have a level of safety and security, right? They've got to feel safe and they've got to feel secure. As in, they've got to feel safe. They can tell you anything, even stuff they're struggling with, and they've got to feel secure. They're not going to get judged or, if they share stuff they're struggling with. So those 5 things build high performing teams. Fact, right? And if you study anything around high performing teams, all of those 5 elements, that's it. That's the ball game. And that's stuff you can learn. Sports teams have figured it out. The military have figured it out. The military spend millions of pounds every year building high performing teams. And yet somehow businesses boil it down to the essence of, I send my teams out for a team night out for a pizza and we go bowling once every 6 months. And, the idea, I've had a lot of fun this year, Graham, you'll like this, saying to clients, I think we should do annual kickoff days for clients in January. And the 4 clients who've said, that's a good idea, we should do that. Guess what? They had record 6 months for the first half of the year. Like all of them, all 4 of them. So I've gone back to other clients now and said, by the way, do you remember when you said in January you didn't really think it was worth doing a team kickoff day? Well, here's the data. The 4 clients who did a team kickoff day have all had record 6 months. Do you want to crush the end of the year? And they were all like, yeah, how do we do that? I was like, we have a September end of year day to get everyone focused for the end of the year. And it's amazing how many of them have gone, oh yeah, okay, that's a good idea now, we should do that. And I'm like, okay, so you just needed the data to convince. You've obviously got more refining energy in than I realised. But I think with all of this, it's like you have to have a passion for your people, right? Yeah. Some CEOs, I think, have passion for products, but not passion for the people. And that's okay, but you need a COO who's got a passion for the people, right?
Yep. And I think when you look at when a COO steps into a role, it's one of the most misunderstood roles, I think, in a senior leadership team. A CMO or a CFO, they're very much in a functional box. It's not the same for a COO because it's different for every organisation. That's why 4 and 5 are not right for a CEO, because that fit, that yin and yang fit, is critical to that working. So a COO doesn't have to be an HR or a sales or a marketing or a finance expert. They need to be able to read the right reports and work with the heads of department to get that right. And know how to interpret that information. But they do need to be an expert in people. They have to be able to get the people to work, or the model simply doesn't work. But that blend of energy, the yin and yang we spoke about earlier, really important. Cameron Herald talks a lot about that in his Second in Command book.
Brilliant book. Yeah, absolutely very, very brilliant book. Yeah, a required reading for every client of mine that I coach. So. Without question, read Second in Command. Absolutely brilliant. So talking about COOs then, so you've identified, from your perspective and the way you operate, you think there are 7 types of sort of 2 ICs?
So this came out of the Harvard Business Review a few years ago, and Cameron Hill talks about it in his book as well. And I tried to find an 8th, but decided that the Harvard Business Review was a better authority.
7 is still a good energetic number, right? 7 is a very strong energetic number. We're okay with that.
Yeah. I'm comfortable
7 and 12. They're very, very strong numbers.
Those are all very different shaped COOs. What I've also found is when you look at putting a COO into place, looking at how they've scaled what they've done before is quite an important part of the conversation.
Ooh, that's a great insight,
and that's often ignored. So if you're bringing let's say you're running a £5 million business and you want to scale to 10, you bring in a COO in who's worked in a £2 million business and scaled to 5.
Yep.
So you're buying what you've got right now.
Yep.
So you're buying today and not tomorrow. That's not to say tomorrow can't happen, but if you're bringing a COO in and having that conversation, you really need to press those possibilities.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. That's yeah.
And if you've got somebody that come back to Cameron Herald, he's got a fabulous example. He was very experienced COO, worked for one of his best friends at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. They took that business to $100 million together, and Cameron couldn't figure out how to take the next step because the CEO was really ambitious and wanted to push on, and he couldn't figure it out. And he said we had a very difficult conversation, and I got sacked. And he's very transparent about it. And the COO who replaced him was on the board at Starbucks, and the first thing she said was, "What a cute little company."
Yeah.
So it puts the scale in perspective. She had the knowledge and the strategy to be able to take the business forward because she'd been there.
Well, we've just done this in our coaching business because Nicola's obviously joined the team and come from a construction business where at its peak she had 300 people in the division that she was heading up, and she was running a sales team of 17 people, or I think it's 17 or 18, doing 20+ million directly in that sales team. I think it was even more than that actually, but so she's coming from a much bigger commercial business, and the reason for bringing her in is one, so that she adds a different level of perspective to clients of ours who are at that kind of size and have got teams of 300+ people, and two, so that she can look at, and she is already looking at what we're doing and just going, why aren't you doing this and this? Because we could grow 10 times faster and we could impact more people and help more people. And again, it's just that I think sometimes it's really smart money to go hire someone who's been higher up the mountain than you've been.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you at least need to be aware of what you're getting yourself into before you make the hire.
Yeah.
So it's a more sensible approach, knowing that, okay, they haven't been there before, but I think they can get us there. Now, if you've asked the right questions at interview and you're comfortable with that,
but you are paying an education price. Mm-hmm. You are paying for them to learn on your money then, in that case, if they've never done it before. Yep. Whereas if you go up the mountain, hire somebody who's been there before, you may pay more in terms of salary, but what you'll get back in terms of time and cost. And Tom Wolfenden talked about this because we had him on the podcast, and he talked about that. He went and hired a COO, and I remember the conversation with him because it was a big 6-figure hire or something, and it was a big stretch, right? And during a coaching call, and then we talked about it on the podcast. And then when she joined that business, within the first 6 weeks, she'd saved her annual salary by reorganizing and renegotiating things that he hadn't even looked at. And that's the value of bringing people in who've been higher up the mountain than you. They're looking down at you and going, well, look, it's really easy. Just go left there, right here, left there. We need a Sherpa with that kit. They just see the landscape differently because you haven't been up that high.
Yeah. One great question, I would say, if a CEO puts the COO hat on, I would say, are you ready for me? So however you're ready to scale, are you ready for a COO at that level? Are you ready for a general manager? Are you ready for a chief of staff? If they ask that question, if you can honestly go back and look at the team, look at the numbers and say, yes, I'm. That's a great question to ask, because sometimes the business it's just not prepared. It's not ready, and the CEO is not ready.
Yeah.
So it's not just about preparing for interview, it's making sure the business is ready for that step.
Great point. So I want to go back a bit in your career, just because you've also had, both you and I share this, we've both had painful experiences with franchising.
Wait. We're going there, are we?
Well, I mean,
okay.
Why not? Right? I mean, we both have, right?
Yeah.
So at one point, I mean, I had a franchise and it got up to 18 people before it imploded and nearly took me under, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. You had to franchise that got to, because you franchised the recruitment business.
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, why?
So,
just in case we're wondering, because...
So my entry into franchising was pretty much the way I got into recruitment. A great candidate that I'd placed into an ops manager role rung me up one day and said, I'm ready to move on. He'd been in there for a couple of years. He said, I'm ready to move on. He said, I've just been thinking about franchising it. I'd like to get into it. And he said, and I'd like to work with you. He said, could we do something together? I said, sure. I said, we can get into franchising together. He said, what does that look like? I said, I've got no idea. Let me go and research it and come back to you. That's how that conversation started. And then I put the phone down and thought, right, who do I know who knows a lot more about franchising than I do? So I picked up the phone to a buddy of mine and asked him. He was the editor of Pathfinder magazine, military magazine. And he put me in touch with a guy called Alan Cawthorne, who was the former sales director at Driver Hire.
Okay.
Big franchise. So I met with Alan, we got on really well, and within 3 months, we put an operations manual together, a sales manual, and we built a model out. I think we 39 offices at one point.
Wow, man, that's massive.
So it's, there's...
Under what brand? Under what brand was that?
Under the Forces Recruitment brand.
Was it really? It was all under Forces Recruitment.
And it's interestingly one of the reasons I got into profiling. We brought some great people into the franchise, and I believed that I could turn. I was too arrogant back then. I believed that I could turn anybody into a good franchise owner who would make money. And the reality is that some people wanted us to do it for them. That's not what they were buying, despite being explicitly clear about that. I can put the phone in your hand, but I can't make the call for you. And some people just weren't prepared to do that. And that was difficult. So in the end, we probably run it successfully for 6-7 years maybe. And then a few people dropped off, and I spent almost all of my time with HR issues and territory disputes. And I thought, this is not why I got into this. And we decided to stop. And we'd one dispute, which I'll just without naming names. The relationship broke down and turned a little bit sour, and he reported us at one point for using somebody else's IP. Now it was done above board, but I had to have an awkward conversation with a recruitment trainer, and that recruitment trainer, we ended up getting on really well. I went down and joined his mastermind, and on that mastermind was you.
Is that where we met? That's the one where we met.
So that dispute, I owe an awful lot to that guy.
I didn't realise that's how you got in the room. I didn't know that. I did not know that.
That's how I ended up in that room, all through that bad experience.
There you
go. Just shows you something.
Sometimes things open doors, right?
That's right.
That's really wow. Because I forget. I came down to London to do a presentation, and it was a boardroom from memory, and you were in it, and there were a couple of other people in it, and I think the only person that did anything with anything at that presentation was you, which is great, because our relationship has gone on for a long time from there, so I'm eternally blessed and grateful for it, which is really cool. But I remember you coming up to me afterwards and going, I was really skeptical about this whole thing, and then like what I showed you were like, that's the best stuff I've ever seen, or something like that.
And I've been in recruitment. I've done dozens of different profiling tools, and that was the first time I looked at a model and thought, right, that makes sense. It's easy to understand. It doesn't try and judge or test. I mean, so many behavioural tools look to test an individual. And that immediately switches half of your audience off who don't want to be tested or psychoanalyzed. Understood, yes. And that was the first time that had made sense. And I thought, I love how that's framed. Yeah, we met up after that. I joined the mastermind, and I think that was about 10 years ago. So
was it really?
Yeah.
With no way.
The rest is history.
Wow. So you've gone from being in a mastermind to then coming on retreat as a member of the mastermind to then coming on retreat as a delegate. But he also then came as a coach for the last 3 years. Yep. You on your third year coming back as a coach? Congratulations, by the way. Well done. And I think, what is it that you like about that environment? What is it that shifts things for you when you get to come on an experience like that?
So the content's great. I think being around good, smart business people, overhearing conversations, little droplets of information where you think, that's nice, I like how that's framed, I can use that in my own business, or I've heard that over here, they've got the same problem here, or there's a solution here, let's connect those people. That happens almost by the hour. You know?
It does.
And on retreat, we've got we've got a great board about the problems that we're solving
Yep.
during that week, so that nobody leaves retreat without the problem being solved.
Yep.
Sometimes that's a team problem, sometimes it's a hiring problem, sometimes it's a purchase problem, sometimes it's a financial problem, and we've got coaches in the room to deal with all of that.
Yeah.
And that the team you put together for retreat, everything's covered, and it feels comprehensive. And the value that people get from that, the value the coaches get from it as well, and it's fun. It's just great to be around like-minded people, solve problems, and do midnight debriefs. It's great.
Yeah. You have this habit of doing this thing you started a couple of years ago. We started like literally debriefs with people on their team using the team report from Contribution Compass. And I think I got a message from one of the clients at about sort of midnight or something. Go, just finished the debrief with Graham, and I'm like, it's midnight. What are you doing? Like, the rest of us are in the bar or in a restaurant, or I'd gone to bed probably at that point, or we're nearly heading that way anyway. Or, and you're doing debriefs at that time of night, you mad human being, you.
It's fun. It's just fun. I love the insights. I love to see when people are looking at the balance of the team, and they've got frictions and problems that they don't know how to get through. And when I'm reading a team report and doing a debrief and chatting with a client, those things light up like beacons for me. I can see what's wrong, and what needs to be fixed, and you have a great conversation around that, because then the client gets excited and starts to light up, and that makes everything worthwhile. When a client goes off to bed, with a spring in their step, thinking another problem solved.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you do a team debrief at midnight, they might go to their bedroom, but they sure as hell ain't going to sleep. No chance, right?
I'll apologise in the morning.
Yeah, in the morning when you see them and they've had 3 hours sleep, and everything we've been trying to say about high performance and sleep being important, you've ruined it because they're having so much fun. And by the way, that'll fry their brain. If they do an hour debrief at midnight, their brain will be spinning for the next couple of years, right?
So I'll apologise in advance.
Nah, it's fine. It's all good. So I want to go back, to the military mindset piece for a minute, right? Which is one of the things you said about the military mindset, and I think it's something that served you well, is the ability to be kind of like resilient.
Yeah.
Can you think of times where that's been a really pivotal skill to have on your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yes. I've got 2 examples. The start of the pandemic.
Okay.
When we were sitting, family were sitting watching Boris's first address, and we were all going into lockdown, and my wife was in tears, and I just turned around to her and said, "This will be fine. We're going to make this a little adventure. We're going to do stuff with the family. We're going to go out for a walk, and we're going to make this fun. But we're going to bind together and we'll fix everything." And she said, "But what's business going to be like?" "Business will be good. No need to worry about that. We'll be good." Now inside I'm thinking, okay, I've got a few things to figure out here.
Just a few. couple of issues.
Me and the rest of the country. But it doesn't occur to me to panic. When something bad happens, I take a step back and say, right, what's going on here? What do I need to think about? And I think the other time is when I was in a mastermind session of yours, about 6 or 7 years ago, and we'd gone through a difficult trading period, and I had a mastermind seat because we were going through a difficult period. So I stood up there and went through some numbers, and we had an accountant in the room who was fiercely scribbling in the back of a cigarette packet a few numbers, and we were, people were chipping in different things to try and solve the problem, and he just said, "You need to pre-pack," and I've never had such a shudder go down my spine before. That was very, very tough. My ops director was on holiday that week.
Yeah, he was skiing. So he was skiing, wasn't he?
He was right out of the way. And I'm sitting there with some solutions coming at me, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. And then I had this massive reality check, And he said to me, you need to get ahead of this right now. Don't put anything else into place, because unless you have a massive stroke of luck, you're not going to make it. We were too far the wrong side. And just gradually over time, it had slid away from us, at the back end of finishing with a franchise. It wasn't a smooth exit. So I spoke to the guy he recommended, who was very good and helped us through that difficult period. We did a Phoenix. We come back again, and we'd to make a few difficult decisions. And it's not something I would choose to go through again.
No, well, we only do that once, really, and then you go, I've had enough. I don't want to do that one again.
No, and since when you start to read, you read a few business books. Peter Jones has been through it. Many entrepreneurs, household names have been through the same thing, and I've used that as experience. But again, even through that period, I didn't panic. I took the action, and that was necessary. And I think he was absolutely right about taking the action there or then. We could probably have bought ourselves another 6 months, just by trying to dig ourselves out of it. But I was already feeling the weight and the stress of having to do that, and it was and it was difficult. So we've now got a much leaner operation, and we're very focused on the right kind of work rather than taking on every kind of role. We're quite careful at what we take on. And if a role's not right for us, I'd rather hand that to somebody else.
Yeah. I think, firstly, thank you for sharing the story. I think my recollection of that meeting was watching the colour drain from your face as we went around the room, and sort of people started to realise how quite precarious the situation was. I also think it's a really interesting lesson in two things, really. One, being in a room like that, and people go, oh, why'd you join a mastermind? Why would you be in a mastermind? Well, sometimes because being in a mastermind is going to give you loads of great ideas about how you can grow your business. And sometimes people are going to tell you stuff that you need to hear, not necessarily that you want to hear. And I think sometimes, we bless Jeff, and Jeff maybe delivers news in a way that isn't. Let's just say it's not. It's delivered with the right heart, but sometimes with quite a heavy sledgehammer. But with the right intention, right? But,
I felt the weight of it. Yeah.
But he was coming from a place of he wanted to protect you and make sure you were, sorted out. But again, it's that sometimes you need somebody who's out of the industry, who's not part of your day-to-day, to look at something and go, you're completely missing this. And if you don't pay attention to that, that's going to be a problem. And I think we all need people around that like that. We all need people around that like that. And I think sometimes those conversations can be about your health. Sometimes they can be about your business. Sometimes they can be about relationships. When someone says you need to pay attention to that, that's a problem. And I think it's you need people around you who are, and this is what I think a good relationship between a CEO and a COO is also. You need someone who's going to call you on your BS, who's going to say, no, you're not in the real world. You need someone to shake you and give you a look. That's not reality. This is reality. Yeah. And I think those kind of relationships are very hard to find, and therefore when you find them, they're worth their weight in gold. And that, I think it was a January meeting, from what I remember, possibly right, or it's January, February anyway, something like that at the beginning of the year. But if you look at where your business got to by the end of the year, it completely kind of, you transformed the whole thing. Yeah, it was painful to go through, and absolutely, you wouldn't wish it on anybody, but those tools are there for a reason, to help businesses get through periods like that.
Yeah.
And I've been through similar sort of experience with my franchise, right? And all of that. And someone said this brilliantly to me once, and I always remember it. It said, people talk about the business cycle, right? This is a cycle. And they said, what you have to remember is that in order for a cycle to work, it has to be round. I was like, right. And they said, so that means that goes from, start up to scale up to and the end of that sort of circle is failing at some point, right? Like something has to, for it to go full circle, you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And I think sometimes, I've often said on stage that you will leave your business. It's a question of whether you leave under your terms and conditions because you've chosen to exit, or whether the market exits you, or a big customer leaving exits you, or circumstances cause it. But understand that what you're doing right now will end.
And we were 18 years in
at
that point as well.
Yeah. All right, so if you're enjoying this conversation and you want to find out more about maybe how you can improve your team dynamics, here's your opportunity. So go to teamdynamics.com for tons of free resources, tips, tools, and checklists to help you build a high-performing team. Plus, you can find out and download our guide to the 8 habits of highly effective leaders and how they build great teams. That report's available for you at teamdynamics.com. Jump over there right now. Back to the episode. All right, so let's chat about I think it'd be a good place to, draw this to a beautiful ending. Let's talk about the actual 7 types of second in commands.
Sure.
Can you walk us through those?
Yeah. So you've got the executor first of all. That's probably the most common, and the executor comes in to execute the plans of the CEO, make sure that things are delivered on time and on budget, and gives the CEO the freedom to go off and see the vision. There's one example of a COO that we placed had sacked the CEO from meetings, which was an interesting conversation. And the CEO said, "What am I supposed to do now?" And the COO said, "Go and do CEO stuff," which I thought was quite fun. We've then got the change agent. The change agent is usually brought in as a firefighter. So that could be a change in direction of the company, could be entering a new market, moving into a new country, but something big that's happening in the business. That's often somebody external brought in, so that it may be that the senior leadership team is going through a little bit of a rocky period and won't listen to each other, or the team leaders aren't listening to them, and there's a little bit of a culture challenge. So sometimes the external voice, somebody new coming in, can hold the team together. So that can be quite effective. You've then got the other half, which is your typical yin and yang scenario.
So like opposite sides of the compass, basically?
Opposite sides of the compass, yeah.
Right.
And typically you have an outward and an inward facing balance with a CEO and a COO relationship. It's not always this case, but I would say probably 75-80% of the time, you've usually got an outward facing CEO. Where does that not happen? Where you've got a high refiner or a high sustainer as a CEO. That happens quite a lot in tech firms, where they've come up with a great tech idea, but they're a natural introvert. Then bringing in an outward-facing CEO to engage with the community and do the outward-facing stuff makes sense.
Yep.
But one facing out, one facing in. The inward-facing taking care of the team and making sure the team dynamics are all sorted. So that would be the case for any of these.
Okay.
And there's a lot of overlap with some of these. So you don't always just fit into one category. Sometimes there's a fair bit of overlap. The mentor is the next one. The mentor would be an example like a young startup has got a great idea. They scale very quickly and they need support. They need somebody to come in and guide them through the next stages in order to scale. So Sheryl Sandberg's a great example of that, coming in to mentor Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. When he was 23, she helped to grow Facebook to what it is today. So that's a good example of what the shape of that looks like. We then got the heir apparent. The heir apparent is looking at the next preparing the business for the future. That could be somebody internal or somebody they bring in to test and make sure they've got the leadership qualities to be able to develop and take the business forward. So it gives the CEO a look at them, but allows them to future plan. And then we've got the MVP, the most valuable player. And that's usually to protect somebody from leaving the business. So that could be the most important asset in the business.
Right.
But it keeps them engaged and keeps them in the business. That's not always a good. That's not. That can be a little bit dangerous.
I was going to say, is that a good idea?
Yeah, it can be a little bit dangerous. So that's got to be done with a bit of caution. But it happened to me in my last role at Quest. I fell into a couple of camps, but the MVP MVP very much suited me because I was the the top salesperson who was driving the business forward. So the MD had me earmarked to replace him
Right.
when he retired. So I fell into that bracket. And finally, the partner. And the partner is the balance between the two. So that's sometimes the CEO wants somebody on a level pegging. And that can also be a little bit dangerous because some CEOs are not actually prepared to give up the power and have a balance with a partner. So that just needs a little bit of a check-in. But the overlap that you get with those, the energy balance runs through, and the external, internal, outward-facing, inward-facing, that runs through all of these models as well.
Got it.
But really important to get that right.
Yeah. Wow. Lot to unpack there and think about. And I suppose it comes back to being clear on what kind of CEO you are as well.
Yes. Yeah. And it's an absolute must to check in with your energy, and not just what your profile is. That's the beginning of that journey. Getting a debrief on that and understanding what your numbers are and what your balance is. So it's just as important recognizing what your primary and secondary profiles are and what the tolerances are. The tolerances
Right.
are really important because that tells you, if you've got 35% activating energy, you'll be with a whiteboard for most of the day. But at some point, that energy is going to go.
Yeah.
So where do you go when that happens? Yeah. And if that's only 20%, then that's going to be very different. So you begin to know how that shows up. So my 11% refining energy, my eye for detail that we talked about earlier, I know that's about 45 minutes of focused attention. Now, if I try and put that focused attention at the end of the day, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, true.
So I got to get it done first thing. I wipe it out and move on. So if I've got to do refining work, I have to do it first thing in the morning. Yeah. And I can feel my energy drain as I get close to zero. Yeah. So when I get to about 2%, I'm up like a meerkat looking for people because I need to engage with people and have conversations or a water cooler moment.
That's an important point actually. That any profile and any energy can do anything, right? You can do anything, but you will just all do it differently and for different lengths of time. And it's about how much of a price you pay with your energy by doing those things, right? So anybody can do anything, right? You can do detail, but as you rightly point out, for more than about an hour is the productivity is then going to drop off a cliff, and it's not really worth you doing it at that point. Yep. So you can do it, but it's just that allocation of resource, and thinking of energy as a resource that you want to allocate and go, okay, I need to put the energy into stuff that is going to actually move the needle on the business rather than just doing things that and my experience is if someone's number's less than 10 on any one of the four energies, they tend to avoid doing things that involve that energy as the majority lead energy.
Yeah.
Anything less than 10, they tend to procrastinate like crazy and avoid it. I don't know if you found the same kind of thing.
Yeah, no, these are not really contribution compass numbers, but just looking over time at how those numbers show up for people. I think something around 23% is about the number that really affects day-to-day behaviour.
Right.
And has a significant impact on your day. The further you go below that, the less inflow you're going to be. When you're under 15%, those are things that need to be thought about and planned into your day if you're going to do them. And better still, hand them off, get somebody who's better at it.
Yeah, totally.
And when those numbers go up, those are not just areas of flow, but they're things that you need. If you've got over 30% activating energy, you need to have that somewhere in your life.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you'll go hunting for it.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's true, isn't it? I mean, I remember somebody who had very high coach energy, very high inspiring energy, and yet they were in a role where they were quite on their own a lot. And I said, well, how does that show up and what do you do as a hobby? And they were coaching a netball team, and they had to still be finding a way to meet that need as a human being. And she was, that was how she fulfilled it, which meant she could do the role she was doing because she was getting that need met elsewhere, which I just thought was that was a really interesting insight for me about, okay, so as human beings, we do need to meet these energy needs. And if we don't, we're going to go look for them, as you rightly point out, in our personal life or in our hobbies or things of that nature, right?
And imagine when you've got a good team together, Imagine those team conversations when you're sitting down every week looking at your areas of flow. Imagine when you can just have an open and honest conversation about that. You know, that's how the Red Arrows debrief.
Yeah.
They're open and honest with each other. Frictions, they don't really happen because they're dealt with on a week-to-week basis. We check in on each other's flow. We hand tasks over. We look at how we manage our day, and then flow never looks like 50% again. You know, we're always up at 70, 80%, and it's a good week. And if more CEOs paid attention to that, they'd lose less people.
True.
The engagement would be much, much better.
Yeah, and KPMG have got data on this that talks about profitability going up by 18% just by having a team more engaged, and you know retention and turnover goes down by up to 86% if you have a team that's highly engaged. So there are plenty of hard data commercial reasons to do it as well as the one of actually it's good for morale, it's good for team spirit, and ultimately it builds a high performing culture, which is what we all want, right? As a CEO and a COO, you want a high performing culture. So just to wrap up this conversation, which we've covered a lot and it's been really, really interesting. I think for me, in terms of, we haven't spoken enough on this podcast yet really about kind of the whole team perspective, I think. I mean, it crops up in lots of conversations, but not a dedicated kind of focus on it. So what's your definition of a grown-up business?
A business that listens, a business that has a good culture, looks after the people and looks after the customers in the right way.
Nice. And what would you say to somebody who's considering coming to one of the grown-up business retreats that we run?
Get your credit card out.
All right, fair enough. Okay.
I've been to lots and lots of events. I've paid for many events. I've been to Tony Robbins events, and I've got tons of value. I've always got value from events that I've gone to, but the combination of the content, the insights, the community, I think all of that combined make it the most powerful business event I think you can attend.
Love it. Listen, Graham, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insights on your executive search skills and how to help CEOs scale by finding the right 2IC. It's been great to have you on the Grown Up Business Podcast. We'll see you on the next one. Take care. That concludes this episode of the Grown Up Business Podcast. I hope that got you fired up and ready to grow. The key thing, though, is to remember you get paid on what you get done. So write down the top 3 actions from the show and make sure that you implement those in the next 72 hours. Hey, and while you're at it, make sure you click the links and the resources below this episode to claim free growth resources to help you build the business you desire and deserve. I'll see you on the next episode.